So you're looking at getting into VR development, but you're not really sure where to get started. You've seen all these different types of headsets, and you've seen different recommendations for PCs. Maybe you've seen different recommendations for the best type of engine that you can use for VR development. Well, in this video, I'm going to be breaking down some of the hardware that you absolutely do need in order for VR development, as well as my personal recommendations and just some general tips in order to make it a little bit easier for you when you are getting into VR development. So let's go and jump right into it. All right, so my first suggestion before you do anything with VR development is that if you have the option, I would certainly suggest trying VR first. And this could be anything from going to VR Arcade, borrowing a headset from a friend, borrowing a headset from a family member, some neighbor, someone in order to give you that first experience in VR. The reason I suggest trying a headset first is that it's much different experiencing VR than watching someone else play VR. When you watch it, you're watching it on a flat screen. There's not really that same immersion. If you're particularly susceptible to motion sickness, for example, and you go into VR, you may not be able to last more than maybe half an hour before getting sick and having to take the VR headset off. And that's not particularly pleasant either when you're playing games or when you're developing and you're having to throw a headset on constantly throughout the day. So my first suggestion would be try a VR headset first if you have the option. All right, so now you've tried VR, maybe you've tried a couple of games and you're completely sold. You're ready to jump in. What do you need? First thing you're going to need is a VR headset. And I feel like this is kind of self-explanatory, but the type of VR headset is going to matter a little bit to you. Depending on what kind of audience you reach, how much you're willing to spend, if you want a dedicated PC VR headset. My suggestion for someone who's just looking to jump in, they just need something entry level, something that isn't terribly expensive, would be a Quest or a Quest 2. It's a fairly newer headset, but it is great and it functions as a standalone headset as well. Another suggestion I personally like is the Index. This is actually the headset that I use now on a daily basis. I personally love using the Index. However, the downside to a lot of people is one, it's really expensive, and two, you need a PC that's capable of running it. Now, if you want something a little bit different, maybe you don't want to shell out quite as much as an Index costs, but you still want something that's PC compatible. There are, of course, some other options, such as the Vive or a Reverb, which are both particularly great, at least from what I've heard. I haven't tried either of these yet, but I would definitely like to in the future. And I would definitely suggest, if you're going to do any of these, I would definitely suggest doing your research before buying any of these. The second thing that you are going to need is a PC to run it on, or at the very least, a laptop. And yes, I know laptops are not great at all for game development. However, if you are just looking to get started, I have actually run VR software off of an Alienware laptop. Wasn't a great experience, but it does do the trick. And if you're doing something like a Quest or a Quest 2, because it's a standalone headset, you have a little bit more options as well, because it is an Android-based device. So as long as you're able to build and push it to your Quest, you can test it on the standalone device by itself. Now again, this isn't something I would recommend, but it is certainly an option if you're looking for just a very simple budget setup. The alternative, if you don't want a laptop, there are of course some minimum requirements that are typically recommended for a VR headset. My PC actually does just barely meet the minimum requirements for most VR headsets, having an RX 580, a Ryzen 2400G, 16 gigs RAM. Now, of course, this is going to vary from headset to headset. Some headset manufacturers do have slightly different recommended specs, so I definitely suggest checking out what your VR headset manufacturer says is the minimum or recommended requirements for your VR headset. All right, so now at this point you have the hardware, you're able to run VR, you have Steam VR or Oculus running on your PC, and you're ready and you're able to get started. Maybe at this point you've tried a few more games that you weren't able to try before. So now what do you need to actually get into the development part? Well, you're going to need a game engine, and there are two that are particularly popular in this area, Unreal Engine and Unity. Now, Unity tends to be popular among a lot more people as it's considered a very beginner-friendly game engine. However, if you have watched any of my tutorials, you know that I'm personally fond of Unreal Engine. I find that it's just a little bit easier to work with than Unity. Everything is pretty much set up out of the box, though it isn't great and you do need to do a little bit of extra modifications. That's also where the VR expansion plugin comes in, as I find that is a fantastic plugin for if you want to get into VR development. Now, my first recommendation for you, a little tip, if you are if you're planning to go with either Unity or Unreal Engine and you don't have experience working with either of these, I would suggest, before doing any sort of VR development, trying something that's non-VR first, as VR does run a little bit differently in both of these engines, and I would certainly recommend getting to, at the release experience, how to develop scripts or blueprints or anything like that, depending on what it is you are working with. Now at this point, you're probably looking at some software that you need to further flesh out your game. Models, sound, anything like that. Now I personally am not that great with the modeling or the sound design or anything like that. I myself am more of a programmer. So for me, finding these assets, I usually go through the Unreal Engine Marketplace or the Unity Asset Store, depending on which it is I'm working with. Both are pretty good options. You're not going to find anything perfect for what you need, most likely, but you should be able to find any sort of assets that'll do the job. Now, going even further than that, if you're looking to, for example, design the models yourself, there is some software to get this done. The first software that I would recommend is Blender. This is great if you're just looking to start out. You don't want to put out a whole bunch of money or anything like that. You just need something to get you started. Now, if you're looking for anything that's a little bit more professional, then some other alternatives to Blender are 3ds Max and Maya. Both are pretty good options. Again, I'm not big on the modeling side, but these are professional level software and they are very often used. So they are certainly something that I would recommend if you're looking to get into further modeling or anything like that. Now, if you're looking to also have some sound design done, my recommendation would be to go to Freesound. I am not at all skilled when it comes to sound design, so this is typically where I go just to get some pretty simple sounds done for any games that I do or any other kind of software for that matter. And with that, that should be just about everything that you need really to get started. The last step really is you developing something in VR. It doesn't even need to be particularly great, but getting started and developing something I found is something that just works, you know? Trying something, going and looking at tutorials, and learning through the process, I think, is just a great tool in order to help you learn how to develop any sort of VR applications at all. Hope you guys liked this video. If you did and you'd like to see more like this, be sure to hit the subscribe and like button down below. And let me know in the comments if you guys have any additional tips that you guys would leave for anybody who's looking to get started in VR development that maybe I just missed out. And with that, I will go ahead and see you in the next reality.